You know what makes a great lighting designer? You never notice their work. The best lighting subtly enhances just the right things in every scene through careful color choices and curation of focus and intensity. But lighting is really hard, and as a rookie teacher, it was a daunting task to try and learn all the theory and practice that goes into the art form. On this episode of Critical Dramatics, I interviewed Charles Page, a professional lighting designer, former teacher, and current sales representative for Texas Scenic. Charles is one of the first people to really take time and teach me a lot of what I know about lighting theory and practice. I asked him on this podcast to share his advice on learning lighting design, pick his brain about technical teaching strategies, and find out his perspective on technical theater in the current crisis. Welcome to Critical Dramatics. This is going to be my second episode. I have Charles Page here to talk about lighting, teaching lighting, and some of his thoughts on the pandemic and ways to work around it, as well as his expertise, tips, tricks, and advice. So, Charles, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and some of the stuff you're working on?
I got into theater when I was in high school. And I was a technician and I was on stage a lot. And I took a 10-year break to be in the military and then go back to college and have a career in all of those things. I've done a lot of different things in my past. And I ended up falling in love with lighting design mostly because I was told that it's a black art and you can't do that. That the information isn't available, that nobody teaches that you're not old enough, you're an underclassman, you're all of those things. And just by pure personality alone, the surest way to get me to do something is to tell me that I can't. So I started with at Brookhaven College, and I had my first lighting mentor is actually the same age as me.
Mm-hmm.
And his name is Michael Clack, and love him to death, and he started me out in it. Since then, I've really poured myself into this career. I just got elected to my second position on the Southwest region of USITT board. I'm now the treasurer and the vice president for development. A lot of nonprofit work. I've designed in spaces that are absolute fire traps, all the way up to regional theaters. And I truly love it. I fell into teaching, literally fell into teaching. I was notified about a job by one of my former mentors, and and I said, "Really, you want me to teach? I don't know that would be a great fit for me." And she said, "Just go check it out, and if you like it, you can do it. If you don't have to take the job." I said, "Okay." So I went, and the students were absolute sponges. Mm-hmm. They wanted so badly to hear what I had to say and my thoughts and my ideas, and I was hooked. So I started teaching. And since then I've done all of the theatrical teaching in Texas. I've done the big musicals, I've done the UIL competitions, I've done the all kinds of things. And so my background is widely varied. At one point when I was in graduate school, I made a choice that I was no longer going to be on stage. And the reason that I made that choice is because I worked with some people who were so absolutely amazing and dedicated to their craft that I realized that if I worked for the rest of my life, that I would never be at the level that they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I did know, however, that I have an artistic comment. I have an artistic lens to put in front of their work Therefore, I began focusing on what I did have a passion for, which happened to be lighting design and lighting implementation and all of those things. And so then I got to be part of the collaborative instead of being left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up with a better production because of it. And I enjoy being on stage. However, my strength is in the things that I can say through my artwork and augment and help and make that truly collaborative art form in the end. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. The thing that I always stress to my students and anybody that I'm talking to about this is my definition of art, because I truly believe that we are creating art. Art is the transfer of emotion through a controlled medium. And that gives us this definitive box to start from, because it's very important when we're talking about art to know who you are so that you can reflect those emotions back out to your audience. And we make people feel. That's what we do. That's the entire purpose of what we do. To not only connect, but to entertain and educate and all of those grand ideas, but that human emotion is one of the reasons why our art form is still alive.
I agree. And I think, so one of the things I wanted to touch on, the kind of like universal appeal that idea that whatever art form you kind of take, it doesn't matter as long as you're trying to display that sort of like range of human emotions. And I think it's really cool that you brought up that lighting was sort of, I don't know, maybe in the beginning of your career looked down upon. You kind of referenced it as a dark art, which makes me think of some sort of like magic, which it is. And I think almost more than many of the aspects of theater, it is almost like magic. I mean, you're playing with the fundamental forces of physics and energy.
It's why so many of us have a God complex. It's the absolute truth. The first thing that God said was to let there be light, and that's the first thing that the lighting designer says as well. So, no, you're absolutely right, and we're there's magic in the theater, and the theater is magic thing that we all do when we were in high school and all of that type of thing, and the big team bonding thing, and you're right, and I agree with you, but we are the magic makers. We are the ones that make that magic. We're the ones that cause these things to happen. And the idea that we can take and create this dissonance in reality for people to go with us and have the whole suspension of disbelief that they're going to go along with us and they're going to believe this story, and we literally get to dictate to them how they feel about this story.
Mm-hmm.
What their reactions are. You're absolutely right. It's a wonderful thing. And I think that a lot of times lighting is still a dark art, that it is unavailable, that people don't understand how to, and unfortunately too many of us are very protective over the information that we have, and very protective over where so many people are scared that, well, if I teach them everything I know, then they don't need me.
Yeah.
And I think that that's folly to begin with, because you make your way. And if there's somebody else who you mentor and you teach and they become better than you, then the world is a better place.
And I think something that you kind of talked about, that maybe people don't understand. I would almost say like that's with every aspect of theater. But more so with like a perception. Like people have an idea, they think. One of my favorite things is like to ask students, what do you think acting is? And like, I don't know to say like 80% of the time they're like, lying. Acting is lying. And you're like, I get that that's the perception, and maybe there's a piece somewhere in there that is false, but so much of that's wrong, So I would say that maybe like all art has this weird, like the first layer perception people are just so wrong about, and that it's so much deeper and richer. So that kind of brings me to starting off. If someone, like let's say a student or a teacher like me, my background is mostly in acting and directing. If I wanted to pick up lighting, where would you suggest I begin?
The place that you need to begin is in your heart. And that sounds weird, but it's the absolute truth.
Yeah.
Um, you have to become humble.
Hmm.
You have to have humility about lighting and about moving forward with it, because it's several different languages,
Hmm.
and it's several different thought processes. We are surrounded by light every
Hmm.
day. As a matter of fact, one of the greatest fears of humanity since the beginning of time has been the absence of light. We You cannot physically see anything that does not reflect light. If it doesn't reflect light, it doesn't exist. There are so many horror movies and superhero movies and things like that that deal with not being able to see something,
Hmm.
whether that be something physical or being something emotional or betrayal, and it all ties together. So the idea that you're going to get into lighting is the first thing you have to do is you have to take that great big director hat that we all wear, and you have to set it to the side. And you have to understand that there's going to be a lot of information, and there's going to be, because it's a meld between a technology and a feeling, and
Hmm.
you're bolting these together almost like some type of cyborg, and you can get your god complex back later.
Yeah.
We have to put it to the side to begin with, because it's a a good lighting designer is not made on opening night,
Hmm.
okay, or at an award show, or when they're standing up in front of people talking. A good lighting designer is made at 3 a.m. on a Thursday. That's when that's when it happens. That's when the passion happens. That's when the ability happens. The other thing that I would tell you is to avoid Pinterest. Uh,
Got it.
the reason why is because there's so many research dead ends there, and
Hmm.
it's taking a final product and saying that's what I want,
Gotcha.
as opposed to what is created, why is it created, how was it created, and the why is the most important part, because every single production is going to be different. If I was an actor and I was doing Alice in Wonderland,
Hmm.
and I went and I tried to recreate Johnny Depp's performance in his Alice in Wonderland, and I'd literally word for word, action for action, try to do the entire thing, I would end up with a fake version of
Hmm.
that, and it would be recognizable as such, and the quality wouldn't ever be what I wanted it to be.
Hmm.
It's the same thing when we're talking about lighting. So I would avoid Pinterest, because there's so many research dead ends. You'll have this beautiful look, and that's what I want. And we need to create from the beginning, from the bottom. Your artwork is based in your script, and so should your lighting be. Uh,
So if I can just interject here for a
Absolutely.
second, kind of what you're saying is lighting design is a process. It's not a product.
Hmm.
And I actually heard something really recently studying some educational theorists, and it was if you don't have a process, then you don't know what you're doing. Um, and I really like that. And so I think one of the things I would say to anybody listening to this is it's a process. So what is yours? What is your process?
Uh, Process number one is read the script, and
Hmm.
that's step 1 through 100. When I was teaching students and they said they wanted to be a designer, I didn't believe that they knew that what they were asking for.
Hmm.
And so their requirement was that they read their script once a day,
Yeah.
cover to cover. Your script is your Bible. It's everything that you're drawing from. So we have to take that black and white, and we have to turn it into an entire world.
Hmm.
So step one is read the script, and I need to know the script. I need to understand the script. I need to know what's going on in the script. And yes, there's cliff notes and there's things like that, but it's also a collaborative art form. So I can talk about the script with other people. The director, the costume designer, the scenic designer. I can talk to these people about this script, but I have to read the script. And it's not a familiarization thing, even with shows that I've already designed. I
Hmm.
have to read that script ad nauseum. So while I'm designing a show, I'll have the script with me,
Oh
and
yeah.
I will read that script and I'll reference that script. Once I get to the point where I'm comfortable and I know the story and I'm identifying with the story in some way, then I'll go through and I'll start reading it for lighting. So I'll do several breakdowns. I'll do a character breakdown. I will do a moment breakdown, a time breakdown, a not only time of day, but what year is it? What region is it? all of these functional, all of these functional bits that I need. And then as I continue developing that, I'm going to start writing cues. And I want this transition to happen. And the cues aren't always, this is one of those things where a light cue doesn't have to be we're going from night to day. A light cue can absolutely be a small shift in tone or color to indicate an emotional transition inside of a scene. So often we forget about lighting, and we do lighting right at the very end, and we're like, okay, well, it's just lights up, lights down. That is the absolute number one way to guarantee that you get the worst product possible out of that person.
Yeah.
It's just lights up, lights down. It's simple. It's easy.
No.
It can be, but you're neutering the person who's designing. So once I have my cues written, I transition over into functionality, because now I have the movie in my head. Now I have all the pictures. I can see the show as it's going. I want to watch a few rehearsals because I want to see how these characters are being developed. I want to see what direction the show is going in. And we're going to have production meetings, and we're going to talk about, this is what I think about that. I'm going to have a couple of presentations for my directors and the other designers and say, this is what I'm thinking, and this is what the direction I'm going. And we can talk about those philosophical ideas. And then I start moving into a functional space where I'm looking at the fixtures that I have. I'm looking at the capability of the fixtures, at the physical space that I'm in. I start looking at the scenic design, or at least where the scenic design is, so that I can start making a rudimentary plot. Once I have that done, then I'm kind of in a holding pattern, because I have to wait for the rest of the production to catch up. So while that's happening, I will continue to read my script, and generally I'm usually at that point I'm working on my next show. So there's an incubation period.
Yeah.
Which is really good. You need that incubation period. If you're just bang, 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 then you don't ever get any reflection on the choices that you've made. And allowing for that incubation period. And it may be a day. It may be a week. It may be 6 weeks that this gets to incubate. It depends on how diligent you were in the beginning process.
So one of the things that my journey for directing, when I first started off, I was much kind of what you would really warn against. Bang, 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 bang. And then what I started to learn is that, my subconscious, if you throw stuff to it, it like slowly kind of like looks at it, puts it down, picks something up. And like in the back of your brain, the wheels are always sort of like turning. And if you give yourself the right nutrients and enough time, some really good fruit will pop up, and you don't have to expend as much active energy on it. So I really like what you're talking about.
Absolutely. It's very important to let that incubation happen.
So I really like a lot of sort of like the theoretical as well as sort of your soft technology. I think that's what I'm going to call it, where sort of like the models that you have put forward. What are some of the technical things, basic technical things, maybe talking about boards or lighting equipment that someone starting off would need to know?
The basis of the technical equipment is a lot of times it's driven by money. The theatrical equipment is very expensive, and there's really no way of getting around that. Can you do it with other things? Yes, absolutely. You can do theatrical lighting cheaply. You're not going to get the Metropolitan Opera result. And so basic things like direction, intensity, quality, and color. Those are things that are very important. So your different fixtures are going to give you these different ideas, these different qualities of light. They give you different colors of light, and they'll give you different intensities of light. One of the things that I find that new people in lighting struggle with the most is creating an even field of light outside of a single fixture. They have dips, and they have dark spots, and they're always and the answer isn't always to add another light. The answer is to use the light that you have effectively. As far as boards go, we have gone past the days of having an analog lighting console. There are many that are available to you. Finding out what works best for your budget and your space, that'll give you the idea of what you should be working on and what you should be learning.
Hmm.
There's lighting consoles that plug into your computer, like the ETC Nomad is one. It's a low cost. It's a DMX emulator where you can literally plug it in, run the free software on your computer, and control your lighting system, putting out a DMX signal to your lighting system.
Can you ballpark the price for that for me?
ETC Nomad, I want to say they're running about $1,500.
Okay. And would that be on the lower end of things?
I would call it that. Now ETC, I'm almost as close to an ETC fanboy as you can possibly get. Just in full disclosure, that's what I am. I understand the history of ETC and Strand and some others, and I've been around for a lot of it.
Hmm.
I've seen the rise and the fall of different companies. ETC has a very broad support network, a
Hmm.
very very broad support network. So yes, the that would be the lower end of control consoles, and but it also offers some flexibility. Like you have an offline mode to it where I can take my laptop to the house and I can program lights at my house.
Oh, yeah, that's really cool.
And if you go up from there and you go into like the EOS family that has the Ion in it and the EOS, those offline editors are still available to you.
Hmm.
You know, we've kind of entered into a new era where this idea of theatrical technology is being implemented into elementary schools,
Yeah.
uh, where we have stages. And so if I take this up there, I feel like I need to pause for a second and talk about the plight of the theater teacher. Uh,
Please do. That's kind of what this is all about.
the I Because I was a professional lighting designer long before became a teacher.
Hmm.
The the teaching profession is what I had to learn.
Yeah.
The content was never a problem for me. Matter of fact, I wrote curriculum for two large school districts. Uh,
I
it
was
was
there. Yeah.
You were there. You were there for one of them, and I also did it for Sci-Fair. It was the content was never a struggle for me because that was my recreation. That's what I did. It was who my career was, you know.
Hmm.
And so many times we take a person who has a singular experience, or they have a this is what I do. I'm an actor, or I'm a director, or I'm a scenic artist. And in the public education form, especially in a high school, you take and you put absolutely everything on that person. They're doing the job of 12 people or more.
Hmm. Yeah.
So they need to direct, they need to act, they need to be the lighting designer, the scenic designer, the costume designer, the makeup artist. They have to do everything. And they have to be the financial manager and the front of house manager, and they have to make the posters. And so a lot of times there's not enough hours in the day. And I truly feel for the plight of the theater teacher in public education because they are alone. And even if you have a staff, you have three people. Well, great. That's wonderful. Now the administration says, okay, great, you're going to do 12 shows now instead of 5.
Yeah.
And because we want to do more shows and we want to have more kids involved, and they only come and take a snapshot of what's going on. Your administrator will sit on the side of the football field an entire season and watch every snap of a game, but they'll only come and see one night of your show,
Yeah.
as opposed to if in that football analogy, you'd be taking a picture of the scoreboard at the end of the game,
Yeah.
and that's all that they go off of. And it's a plight, it's a struggle. And so when I talk about these things, I'm a lighting designer, I'm a technical director. I get that it's going to take time. I don't expect anybody who wants to tackle lighting to be this absolutely amazing lighting designer within, or even a technical director in a year or in 5 years. It
Hmm.
There's a process there, and I understand the load that's being carried.
Yeah.
So
It's a
even
good thing to.
knowing the pieces takes time.
Hmm.
You know, knowing the tool, you can do amazing things with a hammer and a chisel, but you have to know the hammer and chisel first.
It's a really good point. So, so we've talked a little bit about it's a process because I do think that that's one of the things that really like a wall that gets put in front of people. I know I felt it, I faced it when I had to start figuring out how to do some lighting is because I was like, it's too much. But I do think that's really important for people listening is it's a process. Your first couple lighting designs are not going to be bangers. They're not.
I've always said that if you have to ask if it's good enough, you already know the answer.
Mhm.
And the goal is to make you wouldn't expect somebody to come into your acting one class on the first day and give you a Kenneth Branagh performance.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't. So why would we expect somebody to their look? I've been teaching for 2 years, and
Mhm.
I'm doing all of this by myself. And you walk in, and you're like, you're actually really surprised that the lighting design has almost any merit. It's okay as long as if you want to get better at it, and you want that element to be everything that it possibly can be to augment your story and to lift the collaborative process and lift that process up, then it's going to take time for you to either learn it yourself or you're going to have to find somebody who does that.
So to kind of sum up what you would say for anyone getting into this is number one, set your expectations low. Number two, learn your board. And number three, learn your lighting instruments.
Those things are going to help a lot
Hmm.
because you have, like I said, there's two main elements too. I'm not sure that I would ever encourage somebody to set their expectations low,
Okay.
but I would say be accepting of your result because
Mm,
the betterment of the process is uh, it is more important than what your first result is,
gotcha.
or your 10th result, or your 100th
Hmm.
result. Because if you get a little bit better every single time, then by the time you've been doing it for 10 years, then you're going to have a really good product.
Hmm.
But the shifting sands of technology always make that challenging. So keeping up with the latest technology, understanding that the industry is going away from incandescent and going towards LED,
Right.
which adds another layer of complexity because now we have the ability to create source color, which
Hmm.
changes all of the old lighting theory that we had because now we're no longer removing spectrum from the light. Now we're creating spectrum.
Adding
So it
it too.
even changes the way that the light reflects off of our subject. Um, so what rig you have is it's very important that you understand that rig and that you know your console, know your lighting instruments, know what their purpose is, and then you can make choices about what you want to do and construct your show. It is a process, and I think the most detrimental thing that you can possibly do is leave it for last.
Got you.
If you leave it as the last thing, then it's going to look like it's the last thing, and lighting affects everything else.
And I do want to point out kind of something we touched on earlier is that if you're doing the reading, if you do the script work, that this lighting should be a part of the process and it's not something that's set aside, it's something that goes with it. One of the things that when I started doing junior high teaching is that my technical staff, me and my coworker, we weren't highly technical, so it had to come from my vision as a director. What were the lights going to be? And that really did help. Was the more book work I did. And I do also want to point out, I think you're right. Low expectations is a recipe for disaster. High expectations with an understanding and forgiveness maybe is more what I was thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't beat yourself to death. And there's an old saying that nobody notices the lighting until it's bad.
Yeah.
Uh, and so there's a lot of forgiveness because nobody knows what to expect from your lighting design.
Hmm.
The expectations of your audience, who is a primary consumer of your art form, are very low as far as lighting is concerned.
Yeah.
They really are. If they were paying $100 a ticket to go and see, yes, they would expect the lighting to be good. And if it was bad, they would have a big problem with it. But in your local production, the expectation is set very low. Therefore, it's a self-driven expectation. And if you look at your product, you also understand the process, but be careful that you don't use it as an excuse for your product to be less than what it can be.
Yeah. It's a very good
So
point.
it's a tricky balance as to have very high expectations for your lighting, but also understand that the why is way more important than the product at the end. Why did
So
you do this?
yeah, I do. I agree with that. So one thing I do want to kind of steer us towards is, so with all this learning, you got to learn your board, you got to learn your instruments. What are some resources that you would suggest? Maybe websites or people or places to go to?
I would tell you that ETC has a fantastic learning community. There are many forums online where there are people who have been doing this for decades, give advice freely. You get out there and you read the forums. Backstage is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you literally Google, beginner lighting design for theater. And, Sweetwater, who does a lot of audio visual, has a stage lighting 101 page.
Mm-hmm.
And there's YouTube videos and different sites and different educational sites. Penn State, there's other ones that will have beginner classes that they put their syllabi and their materials online for their students. And especially now with all the virtual learning we're doing, that's becoming a lot more prevalent. Mm-hmm. So the information is there. You'll also find different theories. But the idea, and I actually did that earlier. Beginning lighting design for theater, and the number 4 result is from Pinterest. And it's 100 plus stage lighting ideas, cheap, easy, do it yourself professional fog chiller. Okay, you can have there's 3 types of jobs: good, fast, and cheap. You can have any 2 of those.
Yeah.
But your online resources are massive. There are older texts that are harder to find and a lot more expensive. When you're going out and paying $150 for a textbook, it makes it, you really have to question whether or not, I'll do that, but that's because I really want this edition of that textbook because I want it to go in my collection.
Yeah.
Or I know the person who wrote it or something like that. That's the type of thing where I'm going, I'm definitely buying that. But you're online, and like I said, if you're humble about it, then you can make that Google search and put the right thing in there to get the result that you need.
Got it.
If I go in and say, lighting design for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, well, I'm going to get a whole bunch of lighting designs for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and I'm going to look at their product, and I'm not going to see any of the process. I need to know my fixtures. I need to know my console, how to control it, and I need to do all of that legwork, that script work. So there are a lot of online resources, and ETC is a manufacturer, but they also want people to know how to use their equipment.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point.
When you go, if you're a Texas theater teacher and you go to the convention, you go to Thespians Convention, or you go to UIL workshops, you go to things like that. I'll also make an absolutely shameless plug for my organization. The Southwest region of USITT has a symposium every year that has professional lighting designers and people who've been doing this for decades and decades that will present classes on exactly the things that we're talking about. And yes, you're right. There is no 7 a.m. yoga with Mama Yeye at the USITT convention. It's not a thing. But when you go to these conventions, I always find it super interesting that yes, we want to be better at our craft. But if I've been a director and a performer for 15 or 20 years, do I really, really need that next diction class, or do I need to go to the class where we're talking about lighting 101?
Yeah.
Which one is going to serve me the best?
I think that is important that whatever board, whatever lighting instrument you have, go there first, and then start going to these symposiums, because that's sort of what I did, and I think it had some good results. I was not an amazing lighting designer, but I had at least enough vision to put something that people were like, ooh.
And I really hope that your journey isn't done. I hope that you have the opportunity to continue to grow that craft. And the reason why is because it only makes you better.
Yeah. So moving kind of towards the next step, what would be sort of your advice for teaching lighting? Someone new, maybe first year, maybe they don't have a whole bunch of background in lighting, but they're like, I got the job. What would be your suggestions on maybe some things to do, some activities, projects?
Okay, the first step that I would always recommend is to look around you. Uh, like I said, we're surrounded by light all the time. And this is a hook for your students to observe the world around them. Look at the way that the light hits the trees. Talk about the difference in quality of light between Antarctica and sub-Saharan Africa. Talk about how they're surrounded by it. Some of the things that we talked about at the beginning, about the absence of light, about the presence of light, color, intensity, what causes you to think about these. So this is our hook into it, because you're not going to come in and start talking about Sabatini and his silk color and his first dimmable system, and nobody's going to be like, oh my god, I have to learn this. But if you make it a part of their world that they haven't been paying attention to, then you can get that hook in, and then you can start going into the tools, or you can start going into the art of it. Either way, you have a clear path to go at that point, because now showing the relevance of what you're teaching is important. And it extends beyond my Tech Theater 1 class. The importance of lighting, the importance of costuming, the importance of scenic design or construction, that it has to extend past the walls of your classroom. If it doesn't, then your students are going to become very disinterested in it.
Yeah.
So looking around you, seeing how the light interacts with the things. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm watching the video on you right now, and I'm watching the clouds pass by. I can't see the clouds, but because the shadow's on your face, I can see when the clouds are passing by, and the quality of light in your room, and all of that. And that's the type of thing that a lighting designer looks for. Because what does a happy early afternoon in Austin, Texas look like? Well, we can watch the video of Sean Willard's face and find out.
Yeah.
So as we move forward, we want to talk about the tools. These are the things that we use to make what we're talking about, right? Because we live in a dark box. So we're going to bring light to it. We're going to control photons of light. And that is a much more difficult task than what anybody would initially think.
Oh, yeah.
Control the light. Well, it's just light. Just control the light. Try it in your home and try to control the light. Try and get it 100% completely pitch black in your home. It'll be very difficult for you. So, excuse me. So, and then you move forward with it. The tools are going to take time. The hook is going to take time. The art is going to take time as well, talking about it, emotion. And the tools are going to include not just what they are, but how to use them. That whole direction, intensity, quality, and color all become part of that, and showing how the color interacts with it, with the objects on stage, and what we can do and how we can make small adjustments. You'll remember a few years ago, there was an internet fad about the dress. Is it white and gold, or is it black and blue? It's a lighting trick. And when that was very, very, very popular, I took a gold and white striped dress on stage and I turned it black and blue. It's not really hard to do. And the kids were like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's a lighting trick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we talked about how, and I would also give discussions to the physics classes when they would be talking about lighting, about the difference between theory and practicum, and then show them some of the theories that they had been learning in physics class. So there's an entire year worth of knowledge for you to be able to present just on lighting, where you can present the information and you can use all of the teaks that have been laid out by the state of Texas to be able to utilize lighting as your vehicle to teach those teaks.
Yeah.
Now, I also understand that if we get a 3-week or 6-week section of lighting, that we probably are pretty fortunate. So I get that, because we have to cover a lot of different things, especially in our gen ed classes.
Yeah.
When we get our technical theater 1 class, and a lot of places don't even have a technical theater class, so it's part of their acting class. Well, we have to learn some tech. So I understand that. So talking about what it is, how it surrounds the world that we live in, and then looking at the tools, I think is a really good starting point, and then branching out from there, because you have light plots to discuss, where we take and we lay out everything that we're going to put in the air in the exact space in scale on a piece of paper or in a computer program, about how we're going to do all of these things. The art of hand drafting is dying. I hate to say that, but if it's not already dead, that is absolutely on life support, and there's a very few people who can still do it. Uh, a basic a basic program like Google SketchUp, which is free for all educators and all students, uh, is a great place to start 3D modeling. So
Hmm.
if we're gonna model a set, it's a great place for us to go in and model that set. And you can expand into things like Vectorworks or AutoCAD or all of these other things. And so the amount of information that can be used is absolutely intimidating.
Yeah.
I understand that. I mean, I've made an entire career out of it, and I still am intimidated by the amount of information that I have to learn yet.
Yeah.
So I understand that, but and you can't swallow it all at once. You're going to have to take it piece by piece, make a decision about what you're going to learn now, and then work on that, and then you'll find something else. Well, what else can I do? What else can I make myself better at?
Hmm.
The days of us memorizing gel colors are gone. We don't have to do that anymore. We can go into our color picker on our console and pick a color that we want. You know, so for the beginning lighting teacher or the beginning teacher who wants to teach lighting, look around you, observe the world, observe the light in your world, and use that for your students. You can, I love doing light labs if it
Hmm.
is at all possible. You don't need an entire lighting rig to do a light lab. I need two lights,
Hmm.
two lights on floor bases, on a boom or a tree, and that's all I need to do a light lab, because then we can start talking about what is the light doing. Let's look at direction. Let's look at intensity. Let's look at quality. Let's look at color, and all of those are individual lessons.
Yeah.
So there's a wealth of information. The nice thing is that those those lessons and those ideas are freely available to you. And I would highly encourage creativity, because if something sticks with you, it's much more likely to stick with your students. If you are surprised by something, or you didn't expect that to be the case, then use that as often as you possibly can, because your students are going to be interested in it as well. And that
I
humility and being vulnerable will will absolutely endear yourself to your students.
I agree with that. And I think it's important that your students see, and no matter what, just sort of like the passion and fire. So one of the things that I'm passionate about, and I really started kind of prompted me to start this project of like getting the information out there to new or struggling teachers, is equity. So one of the things I was really introduced to this year is this idea that, you know, everyone does not start on on the starting line of life equally. Some are really forward and some are farther back. I've talked before about how I was in a pretty good spot, not the best, but I live in America. That puts me pretty far forward already. I'm a white male, come from a middle class family. Like I had a lot of opportunities to me. And I think that correlates even to like schools. Not every school is equal. That's just some schools have more, some schools have less, some schools have different things. So one of the questions I want to ask you is how do you make lighting more equitable, more accessible to everyone, whether that be through programs or money, grants, even just finding the right tools for the right price?
Okay, so equitability is very important, and every manufacturer of lighting equipment wants people to have their lighting equipment.
Hmm.
Okay, they do. They absolutely do. There are there are grants available for things like that if that's the direction that you want to go. It's just like in the rest of theater, I would tell you that great theater does not require a large budget, and great lighting doesn't require a large budget either. Because great lighting is right for that show in that space with that budget.
Ooh, that's a good
And
point.
I, so one of my least favorite shows, I'm going to tell myself here, is Spring Awakening. And the biggest reason that it's one of my least favorite shows is because it's often done with children.
Yes.
That's if you know what, college age folks, professional theater, all about it, love it, go for it. I'm not a huge fan of having a 9-year old on stage while those things are happening.
I completely agree.
One of my students, who's now off in a Ivy League school and doing all of the great things with lighting design, and loves the place, and uh, was designing for a local theater, and he designed that show there, and he asked me if I would come and see it. I said, absolutely, I'd love to. So I went down and I watched his show. And the rig he had was cheap and old and breaking down and all of those things. But what he had done with that lighting is he took every tool that he had and he used it in the most effective manner that he could possibly conceive.
Mm-hmm.
And so as far as equitability is, the knowledge is available, and I would say that you knowing how to use your tools more effectively is the true path to equity across all boards.
Yeah.
There's many skill sets that we need to master as theatrical practitioners. If I sit here and I look at what somebody else has as opposed to what I have, I'm losing that time of concentration on what I have and how to make what I have the best that it can be.
Gotcha.
I'm not saying you shouldn't strive to improve your rig. I'm not saying you shouldn't strive to learn new equipment. You shouldn't. Everybody wants the Solo Frame 750s that cost $20,000 each for a moving head fixture. I love them. They're fantastic fixtures. If you talk to people and you go to these conventions and you make it a point to, so I did. I think you were there. I did the dance show. I think 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I got an entire lighting rig donated to our school for the dance show.
Wow.
So they gave me $200,000 in lighting fixtures for 3 weeks, and they paid for shipping. So all I had to do was take them out, set them up, put them back in their boxes, and ship them back.
Mm-hmm.
And so those types of connections where, hey, I'm really interested in learning more about this. Is there any chance? And the ETC reps will come out to your school and do a class.
Mm-hmm.
You can get us. I would be more than happy. Any school. I'll give this offer right now. Any school district that wants to do professional development and have lighting as their have a lighting class as their. I would absolutely love to be able to do that, and my company would highly encourage me to do that. We want to serve you, and the reason that we want to serve you, and if you really want to know the full disclosure, the reason that I want to serve you is because when you have a need, you're going to take my card out of your desk and you're going to call my phone number.
Yeah.
So I want to be able to serve your needs and give you the education that you want. All of these companies are more than willing to come out and help. And how do you make a light plot? How do I start off on a lighting design? What are the tools that I'm dealing with? I don't even know what the name of these lights are. Please God help me. And that's perfectly okay. So, but and that requires humility. That requires, hey, I'm going to ask for help.
So I think one of the things that I really like about what you're saying is it's not about the technology, like, because not every school district is going to have the resources. It's so much more about the information and the passion and the drive. One of the things that I learned studying technology and education is that by like 2010, every school had a computer with Wi-Fi. So like we had Bridge in the US, this huge gap. Problem was, no one was using them. Real quick, I got some really fancy technology my last year teaching, and I barely scratched the surface of how to use it because I didn't know. And the training I got was 30 minutes. It was 30-minute training, and then it was up to me to explore. So I do think that's important for anybody trying to learn lights. You got to learn lights. It's not so much about the technology or the money or the equipment. It is so much more about your knowledge. So I really like that. So moving on to knowledge, I did want to pick your brain because I know you, from what I understand, you're not teaching right now, right?
I am not teaching anymore.
So I'm really curious, how would you teach during the pandemic, lighting specifically? Because I know that like when it hit, I was teaching and the spring was crazy. And then I taught a little bit in the summer, and now I'm not teaching right now. So I've shared some things with some teachers, but I'm really curious, you, especially with your kind of professional background, how would you do it?
The biggest challenge initially, and I've thought about this a lot. I've had several conversations about this, and I've had people call me, "Oh my, what do I do?" Uh, and I think that the biggest challenge, especially with lighting or with technical theater, is that we appeal to the physical. We appeal to the concrete. So the ability for us to touch something and to create something and to make something work with our hands is where we get a lot of those hooks, where we get a lot of that interest,
Hmm.
and a lot of the participation. Our young generation is much different than previous generations. They are extraordinarily intolerant of bad leadership, and they no longer carry around all of the facts in their head, but they have the ability to sort data and to tell whether data is good data or not way better than we ever could have. It used to be we read something in a newspaper and a book and that was gospel. Well, now it's questioned endlessly.
Yeah.
Uh, so the ability for us, you can, and taking the things that we're doing inside of the space, outside of the pandemic, not teaching remotely, and trying to adapt them for the home it's very, very difficult. And the reason that it's difficult is because I can't take an ETC source 4 and send it to each one of my students' houses.
Hmm.
And they are not going, well, my kids have them at home, but they're the only ones,
Yeah.
you know? So the equipment isn't available. So how do we teach these things? I think we have to go a little further into theory and having them do in their home what we would be doing in the space, which is modify your home, modify your space. Look at what's going on. And so we can you can have projects where we're going to take and we're going to reflect sunlight. And we're going to try and separate that spectrum of sunlight by taking and blocking things out and using different materials to be able to block certain spectrum of that light.
Hmm.
Um, Depending on the level that they're at, if it was my advanced class, I would be having them wire a circuit. I would be having them do things like that, where we're going to take and make a simple circuit, we're going to make a simple light source, or we're going to get an LED strip that has the
Hmm.
ability to color change, and we're going to things that are inexpensive and accessible, things they may already have around the house, where we can get some of that physical touch back because
Hmm.
physical touch is so important to what we do. Uh, I would spend more time on theory and a little less time on practicum just because of the virtual distance. I would probably implement software.
Yeah.
So if I was teaching during the pandemic, my Tech 1 class, I would be teaching Google SketchUp.
Hmm.
We would do probably an entire grading period on Google SketchUp just so that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I think an overreaching idea with all of this pandemic teaching is that eventually it's going to end. And eventually we're going to be back in the classroom. And eventually we're going to have live performance again.
Yeah.
And we can't sit and wait for that to happen. So when we are doing all of our productions and we are doing the things we don't have time to touch on, this is a great time for us to do those. So if we don't have time to sit down and not only learn the program but teach the program and all of those things, then this is a great time to do it because I can do video tutorials. There's millions of them online about how to use this tool. And then when we go back to live, now we have something that makes us faster and makes us better
Hmm.
and more accurate. Uh, so I think there's a lot of options available. I would say that the biggest thing is you can't try to teach your online classes like you teach your in-person classes
Yeah.
because they're different. Uh, and you can't. I don't know that even the lessons can be the same. And you have to craft it for. And I understand it's a huge challenge. There's a lot of people who are teaching simultaneously online and in person, and that means that one or the other is going to suffer.
Yeah.
And it's either going to be your online students who are suffering because they can't do the things that the students in class are doing, or your students in class are going to be suffering because they're literally sitting in class doing an online lesson. So it becomes very difficult to maintain that duality. Uh, but I would absolutely focus on the non-physical and limit my 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 physical activities, because even just taking kids up to the catwalk is an all day affair.
Yeah.
The first time they go up on the catwalk, it's an all day affair, and that's just walking upstairs. So we can't do that. But maybe we can take and film ourselves going up and talk about it the whole
I
time.
was just thinking about that.
Explaining a lesson about what the pit is and what the proscenium is, and familiarizing them with the space, and maybe going into a little bit of history and utilizing all the tools that are available to you to create that lesson. And I understand lesson planning, and I know that lesson planning is a monster. And it's so much of a monster that once we have our lessons planned, even if the technology and the ideas move on past us, we continue using those same old lessons.
It's so hard to update something, or it
Absolutely.
takes time. Maybe that's more. Yeah, I completely agree. I do think so. So literally, what you're describing is what I'm studying right now. Is how do I create an online learning? And one of the things we do talk about is it's completely different. You can't just take a lecture. So, for example, an in-person lecture and just do it digitally. It doesn't work for a variety of reasons: human psychology, sociology. I mean, just humans sitting and staring at a screen for 45 minutes is so difficult. It's why professionals get paid so much to make movies. So I really like that. I don't want to take up too much more of your time because we are pushing that hour, and I know you're a busy man. So I just wanted to leave. Do you have any general advice for lighting, new people, new things, or ideas? Just any sort of last thoughts?
As theatrical practitioners, you are the most passionate people on the planet. You give of yourselves, mind, body, heart, and soul. As teachers, you care about young people. Please don't stop doing what you're doing. This world needs you and needs us. The humanities are nothing without art. This world is nothing without art. So thank you for teaching, and thank you for practicing this art form, and understand that there are people who do understand what you're going through, do understand the struggle, and understand the sacrifices that you make. It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it.
Well, we appreciate your time, Charles, and I do want to thank you again.
And Sean, I would absolutely love it if you, and I don't know if it's a post or anything like that, when you post this, if you would include my email address or my phone number or that type of thing as a resource for anybody who needs some of those things, or anybody who wants professional development or is looking for equipment or knowledge, or they can literally email me a picture of the fixtures that they have, and I will tell them what they are and what they're supposed to use for.
I will make sure that happens.
Thank you.
I know everyone who sees this would appreciate that. Thank you. I want to say thank you to Charles Page for his time on the show, and assure anyone interested in talking with him that I will post his contact information along with this podcast. Critical Dramatics aims to provide professional development of technology in the fine arts classroom and information over areas in technical theater. Music was composed and produced by Brandon Tanner. Thank you for listening.